Welcome back to the Combo Couch, everyone. Pasta Jardula here.
And I'm Fiorella.
And Oz, but the overalls today and the black shirt, the blue overalls, they're looking nice on the ones and twos. Fam, what's going on? How you doing over there?
Hi, fam. I'm in New York.
Okay.
Yes. I pop up different places every day. So
You were just in DC. Now you're in New York. I was in LA. Now I'm back in Vegas. We were in Mexico. We're just jumping around, running around. Fam,
yeah.
I know I've told you this before, that I'm a newspaper guy, right? And I like to get the newspaper. And I'm looking at the front page over here, fam, which is just the AP's extension of every local paper, just like the local news is the extension of the mainstream media, ABC Atlanta 5 or whatever. Fam, I don't see a lot of stuff here on Pakistan. Why wouldn't they put anything about Pakistan? Aren't Americans interested in foreign policy?
Damn. Americans can't even put Pakistan on a map. And I'm not saying that to belittle people. I'm saying it because that's just the way it is. But we haven't talked about this yet, but that false flag New York bombing that happened. First of all, I kind of want to check that out. Second of all, it's very obvious there's a different narrative going on because they're hiding the replies. MSNBC is hiding the replies. And if you go to the hidden replies, because they just broke the news that they found the person's credit card randomly. Yeah. So when you're committing a crime like that, you just randomly drop your credit card.
Hard, exactly.
It reminds me of 9/11. It reminds a lot of people of 9/11. But my point in mentioning that was if they can manipulate information to expand the surveillance state, right? If they can manipulate public perception of an event to expand the surveillance state to basically remove more and more civil rights and liberties from American people domestically. Guys, just think about what they can do when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to what we're talking about with Pakistan, with Russia, Ukraine, and Pakistan's the removal of Imran Khan has the United States' fingerprints all over it. Not to say that Imran Khan was a perfect leader, but this happened, of course, immediately after defying the West and having these talks with India too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to do with it. By the way, what we were talking about right now was just a Brooklyn shooting where a gentleman was accused of throwing in a couple gas canisters, fogging up the place, and then shooting people with a Glock with extended clips. Right now, we don't have a report on any dead. We have 5 seriously injured. We saw the scenes. But the thing that was really odd about it, like Fam just mentioned about his credit card, leaving the credit card to the scene, there's also no video, Fam. It just so happens the cameras that in that area weren't working or functioning. It just so happens that everybody who has a cell phone nowadays, there's no footage whatsoever. So it's very Lee Harvey Oswald-esque about it. And once again, this comes as they are kind of securing gun laws that are going on. They're pushing for more gun laws. And then this stuff happens. I don't mean to get all crazy Alex Jones about the situation, but it smells very, very fishy, fam.
Yeah. I mean, New York is already one of the most, I would say, it was one of the most extreme states when it came to COVID and the pandemic and the vaccination mandates and all of that. So it's no surprise. By the way, the NYPD is corrupt. We all know this. And they already get so much money. You can ask anybody here. So, it's no surprise that they would need to. There's a lot more into that we can talk about next time. But I just wanted to pinpoint exactly. And thank you for clarifying to people exactly what the event was, because it's kind of like, the way it was advertised, it was like, oh, there was a shooting. Oh, but it was like a bomb. And, my friend's like, oh, be careful. You're going to New York and there's like a bombing on the subway. I'm like, a bombing? What are you talking about? And then and it's like, the headlines just get carried away.
Well, the other day there was a manhole blow, and a lot of people thought it was a bomb in New York. So really right now New York is not really one of the safest places to be, even though people say that, oh, it's very heavily guarded and, there's a lot of money there and protection. No, I think people's minds are about to blow over there. And I would probably steer clear of that right now. I mean, look what happened right there in Brooklyn. But let's get into Pakistan, because Pakistan's a very interesting situation, fam. We talk about this all the time. And yeah, of course, you could talk to a Pakistani who would probably have more knowledge about what's going on with the current government today, what Imran Khan was all about. But one thing that we understand, especially on this network, we've quoted, we've said certain things that really tell you that this is what we understand, and that's our government. We understand the regime change playbook. We understand that we have almost 1,000 bases all over this world because we want to control things. So therefore, that means we have to control other governments. We want their resources. It's always about resource extraction and about making sure that they're on top of on our monetary system. The dollar bill, and that's what I learned since going to the 4 countries I've gone outside the U.S. in less than a year. The dollar bill is still existing everywhere. And the United States government and those who are controlling the government want to make sure that the dollar bill is still going to be king. But like you reported, fam, it's no longer going to be unipolar, right? It's going to be multipolar. And now China and Russia are in this game. And they're like, nope, it's not going to all revolve around you. It's going to be about other things. So Pakistan is a very, very interesting situation because, yeah, Imran Khan wasn't the greatest leader, but he was probably one of the better leaders of Pakistan. And a lot of people feel, especially in Pakistan, that he couldn't be bought, that he wasn't corrupt, especially when it came to his foreign policy. He was a cricket player, 1992 champion for the World Cup team, the only cricket championship that Pakistan has ever won. And yeah, you might think that's not something much, but in a country like Pakistan, fam, it means a lot. So Imran Khan is very much glorified.
Yeah. And just before you really take this away, I just want to note that countries in the global south, namely Latin American countries that I visited, whether it's Nicaragua, Honduras, or Peru, or even Venezuela, which recently had their anniversary of the attempted coup against Hugo Chavez, which happened to be the same day Julian Assange was also taken out of the Ecuadorian embassy and put into Belmarsh on April 11th. And those countries are very, very, there is a segment that is extremely nationalistic in a sense of pride, in a sense of adversarial opposition to the West's attempt to take over and to take control. And in spite of there being imperfect leaders, what usually happens in countries that have lived and had lived the consequences of American imperialism, of US imperialism, they sort of unite in spite of not necessarily being in love with ex-politician, because they don't want the West to really come in and take over their country. So I see Pakistan as one of those countries as well.
Well, they're becoming somewhat geopolitically homeless, right? Have a big relationship with Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia over the last couple of years is building a strong relationship with India, and that's kind of like lets Pakistan kind of say, well, where do we stand in the situation? So yeah, let's kind of get into it because I want to give a little brief history, fam. Once again, you could talk to a Pakistani. They can tell you better about their history. It's their history. They live there. They're from that region. I've never been to Pakistan. I hope to go there one day. But I understand the United States government. We understand the United States government, right? Correct, fam? And we understand how they're always pulling the strings. So let's just give a little brush up history and kind of bring us up to where we are today. What do you say?
Bam.
Yes.
Take it away.
Okay. So I started with the Great Divide. And well, first of all, show that thumbnail. Did you show that thumbnail already? Great thumbnail. Imran Khan. A lot of people in the streets. We'll get back to that. We have a video. We'll show that. The Great Divide. By the way, Oz, did you put that Twitter back in there in that video? It's there. I see it. So hopefully it will play. We've been having weird issues with YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. So even to play some videos is kind of weird. So the Great Divide kind of goes back to when it all started. This is by the New Yorker. Okay. In August 1947, when after 300 years in India, the British finally left, the subcontinent was partitioned into 2 independent nation states, Hindu majority India and Muslim majority Pakistan. Immediately there began one of the greatest migrations in human history, as millions of Muslims trekked to the west and East Pakistan, that was later known as Bangladesh, while millions of Hindus and Sikhs headed the opposite direction. Many hundreds of thousands never made it. Across the Indian subcontinent, communities that had coexisted for almost a millennium attacked each other in a terrifying outbreak of sectarian violence, with Hindus and Sikhs on one side and Muslims on the other. A mutual genocide as unexpected as it was unprecedented. In Punjab and Bengal, provinces abutting India's border with West and East Pakistan, respectively, the carnage was especially intense, with massacres, arson, forced conversions, mass abductions, and savage sexual violence. Some 75,000 women were raped, and many of them were then disremembered. I mean, it was just one of those situations, fam, where the Brits pitted both sides against each other. They literally done this throughout their whole lead. So now you give them two countries, you purposely put the Muslims on one side, the Hindus and the Sikhs on the other, and we've had tension, violence, fighting ever since, fam.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, I'm just gonna let you continue, because this has a lot to do with why things are happening. The way that land is partitioned and land is, even in Ukraine, the way land was like completely divided is what led to a lot of conflicts between different ethnic groups. And I think a lot of people sometimes don't talk about that part. There are countries that shouldn't have it become a country, because they had opposing ethnic minorities that were constantly clashing. So,
and that's done by design too, as well, to make sure that it's always unstable, that the colonizers can always maintain some form of control, or at the very least put in their puppet governments. So this talks about the history of coups. Now, something I want to point out right now, fam, is that Pakistan has had like 4 different times they've had military coups. In fact, a prime minister of Pakistan is supposed to have a term of 5 years. Not one of those prime ministers that was elected that wasn't a military coup has finished their time. They've always been removed or whatnot, supported by who? The military. It's like our good friend Raji Rob said at one point in India, and he lived right on the border of India and Pakistan. He said in India, the government controls the military. In Pakistan, the military controls the government. And there's some truth to that too as well. So let's read this here. It's the history of coups. Even though coup d'etats have a long history, they are not often examined by political scientists. Almost every country in the world has experienced some kind of more or less a violent overthrow. This in particular true of the former colonies as well as European countries. However, former colonies have, in the last half of the 20th century, experienced a phenomenon to the greatest degree, and that is why it should be examined specifically with regards to these countries. Pakistan seems to be a perfect case to study. In its brief history, 4 coups and military dictatorships have occurred. Furthermore, there have been several military conspiracies to seize power, which were revealed before they could be executed. Each takeover, respectively, in 1958, which was an Eisenhower, 1969, 1977, and 1999, possesses its own specific features due to the evolution of the internal and international environments, but also to some structural changes that have affected military organization. The last factor in particular should be emphasized. The Pakistani army, during the years in which it was in power, was transformed from a British colonial type that respected the principle of civilian supremacy over the military to an army typical of developing countries where the armed forces often represent the most powerful and best organized public institution, fam. So pretty much what I was just talking about, what I was just mentioning, is that they keep having these military coups, and they're the most organized within the country because they're the most funded. They're always funded by the West. We want to make sure that Pakistan is number one with the United States and the kingdom in trade. We want to make sure that our monetary system flows there. We want to make sure that we use that country as a base or a jumping off point to go in and bomb other countries. Pakistan also produces a lot of opioids, a lot of poppy seeds too as well. So there's a lot in geopolitically, monetarily, and resource-wise why we want to always control Pakistan, which leads up to today.
Yeah.
So the next one is why I just want to point it out, because the one I knew when I started looking into Pakistan was Musharraf. And this is by the Brookings Institute, why Pakistan's former ruler Musharraf was sentenced to death and what it means. Because a lot of times the military dictatorships will come through, the people will have somewhat of a push, maybe get some of their own representation, and then want to hold the military coup leaders accountable. But they never get held accountable because they seek refuge in Dubai and Saudi Arabia. This is about Musharraf. The verdict against Musharraf caps 6-year trial since he was first booked for high treason in court in December 2013 under a case moved by former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's government. Sharif had signaled his intent to bring high treason charges against Musharraf in June 2013, right after he came to power. Now, what he's talking about, fam, is that Musharraf suspended elections, says it was like there was like craziness, whatnot. There was a woman that was going to be one of the first, she was going to be the first female prime minister of Pakistan. Her name was Bhutto, and she was killed. She was shot in the head right before the election. Musharraf and Sharif have a singular history. In October 1999, Musharraf, the then Sharif's chosen chief of army staff, dissolved parliament and ousted Sharif in a bloodless coup. Musharraf declared himself president of Pakistan in 2001 and held general elections in 2002 after disqualifying Sharif and former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto from running for office. That year, his newly formed Pakistani Muslim League, which many called a King's Party, created with the help of defectors from Sharif's party, the Pakistan Muslim League, the PML, when they won control of parliament, cementing Musharraf's hold on power. Musharraf then ruled for about 8 years, fam, but it's one thing after another. It's coup after coup after coup. Like I said, including today, now that we have the situation, what's going on with Imran Khan, not one elected non-military prime minister has held on and finished their 5-year term in Pakistan, fam.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you that you start to question, like, are these countries that have so much Western influence actually independent and sovereign enough to a degree? For example, a lot of people, especially the progressive lefts, have been focusing on Ukraine being a sovereign, independent country. And that's why Russia was unjustified, despite the NATO expansion, despite Russia's red lines that were known by the intelligence community and the military in the United States. Despite all that, they say, well, Ukraine is suffering from Russian imperialism because they're a sovereign country. But it's like, really, are they? If they have constantly been under U.S. and Western control in terms of who their leaders are. And in 2014, of course, with the ousting of a democratically elected leader, Yanukovych, then you can argue that maybe those countries aren't independent and sovereign at that point because of so much influence in the West, that in the moment they do have somebody that is going to put the people of these countries first, they don't last.
At all. They get thrown out pretty quickly. If you put up the list of prime ministers in Pakistan, you'll see some lines that say military, coup, military, prime minister. So let's talk about this really quick because it's kind of interesting. When I said that Imran Khan has this kind of AMLO-ish kind of mentality or persona about him, he's looked at as Imran Khan is looked upon as a populist president. Like I said, he was the 1992 captain of the cricket team that won the championship in the World Cup of Cricket. He's also the first president of this party, this newer party, which is the PTI. They have the PML and the PPP. PPP was a part of Benazir Bhutto's party, very progressive and stuff. But the PTI was more of a populist party. It was started in the late 90s, and he was the first PTI member to become the president. And here he is, Imran Khan, elected the 22nd prime minister of Pakistan. And you can see Pakistan's PTI party, the chairman, Imran Khan, has been elected to the 22nd president of Pakistan. And that was from Islamabad. The chairman, Imran Khan, has been elected. Speaker, National Assembly, Asad Quasir, announced the name of the leader to the House after the vote count. So why did it lead to Imran Khan getting pulled out? There's a lot of reasons why people talk about it. He butted heads with MBS kind of out of the gate. Now, everybody butts heads with MBS. Mohammed bin Salman, the leader, the crown royal prince of Saudi Arabia. But he also didn't kind of take on the Pakistani Taliban. He didn't recognize them like a lot of the other former presidents, prime ministers have, or coup leaders or military leaders. So there was this kind of push and shove, and he was never really one to be like a puppet of the West. And they had their eyes on Imran Khan for a while. But the thing that really put it over the top, fan, is just recently when this whole situation started with Russia, Prime Minister Khan decides to go to Moscow and meet with Putin. Here's the picture. Pakistani's Prime Minister, Minister Khan meets with Putin in Moscow amid escalating Ukrainian war. And it says, plain and simple, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan met Russian President Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin on Thursday, the first world leader to visit Russia since the Ukraine crisis erupted, and the first Pakistani leader to visit the country in official capacity in 23 years. Khan, accompanied by a high-level delegation that includes federal ministers in the Russian capital for 2 days, according to a foreign minister, Shah Mahmoud Qureshi. Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit to Russia will be an important milestone in relations between the two countries. During the visit, there are prospects for progress and some other agreements between the two countries, including a north-south gas pipeline. Fam, you know America, you know the government. Will they stand for this behavior from a guy who's supposed to be loyal to the West?
Right. And this was always going to happen. See, this is the bravado of the United States that leads them into situations like this, where they think that they're still operating as this unipolar world when things are changing. You have China that, of course, has risen to a lot of power and a lot of pull in the world agenda, like the global world agenda. And you have economic necessity, and you have also the fact that the United States has been pushing Russia and China together. They have been pushing these countries to act together. And of course, then you have the regional differences where you have these countries that are far closer to each other in physical geographic proximity. That plays a huge role. We're all the way over here. Why do we have to have a say into if X pipeline gets built or not, right? But that's been always the manifest destiny concept, the Monroe Doctrine. Adoption is to continue expanding control and spreading knowledge to the uncivilized countries of the world, especially the global South. So when the global South gets together with a world power with nuclear arms like Russia, the United States is not going to allow that. So while he was elected in 2018, it's been 4 years, and now he's out, right? Isn't their term a 5-year term?
It's a 5-year term. And
so
yeah,
he didn't finish it.
No, he didn't. He, like I said, not one prime minister that's been elected, aside from a coup dictator, a military dictator, has finished out their term. And a lot of the times it's America behind the scenes within the Congress, within their parliament, pushing buttons and stuff. And Imran Khan actually survived the first attempt to get him out just recently, but he didn't survive the second one. And I'm going to read what's going on right now, fam, but I'm going to say, whoa, Marcel, hold your horses over here, because Imran Khan is a populist leader, and he could really change things there. He could be the leader. If he's beloved by the Pakistanis, right, he could twist things around. Let me get you up to date real quick with what happened, because this was definitely working behind the scenes. Remember, Biden never met with Imran Khan, never went and met him, never talked to him, nothing. So this is from truth11.com. Attempted Biden regime coup in Pakistan to replace PM Imran Khan with pro-Western puppet rule. Attempted Biden regime coup in Pakistan to replace PM Imran Khan with pro-Western puppet rule. Then we have, here's the latest on what we discussed in an earlier article. And the early article kind of showed that Imran Khan had beat back the first round to try his removal from the parliament. The coups reflect a longstanding U.S. policy to replace leaders unwilling to sell their souls and nations to a higher power in Washington with subservient ones. Defying hegemony, USA last month, Prime Minister Minister Imran Khan vowed to stay neutral on all things related to Russia's special operation in Ukraine. slamming U.S. Western regimes, he said, "What do you think we are? What do you think of us? Are we your slaves that whatever you say we will do? We are friends with Russia. We are friends with America. We are friends with China and Europe. We are not in any camp against another one." And that's what he said, plain and simple. On Saturday, he denounced foreign meddling in Pakistan's internal affairs after the country's Supreme Court ruled that his move to dissolve parliament was unconstitutional. He acted to thwart a made in the USA no confidence moves to oust him, which virtually sure to go against him as things now stand. So, fam, what he did is that he saw the meddling going on within his own parliament, and he said, "I tell you what, let's just have snap elections. Instead of the Congress handling this, instead of you trying to remove me, let's dissolve the Congress and have elections." The move was said to be unconstitutional by the Pakistani Supreme Court, but there's also laws in place that say that they can defend themselves from any foreign interference. So you're caught in this catch-22 where he's making a move saying, no, there's outside influence from the United States. They don't like what I've been doing. They don't like the fact that I met with Putin. They don't like the fact that I told the EU to go scratch that we're not taking any sides here. They have for long have not liked my foreign policy. They don't like the fact that I'm not chummy with the Taliban. So now they want me removed so they can get their own puppet in. Bullshit. Let's take it to the streets. And that's what's going on. Slide 40. Khan then dissolved the parliament. On Friday, he tweeted the following: "My message to our nation is I have always and will continue to fight for Pak to the last ball. If the no confidence vote is held and Khan loses as expected, the pro-Western opposition bloc can replace him with one of its own. At this time, the vote is scheduled for around 8 p.m. local time on April 9th, fam." He lost that vote. They now have their new leader. That's what's going on. And I have an article here from Al Jazeera that's just telling you what's going on real quick to bring us up to date. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan has been removed from office on Sunday after a no confidence motion brought against him succeeds by a vote by 174-0. This is the first time no confidence motion against the Prime Minister of Pakistan has been successful. Speaker Asad Khazir, who was to preside over the vote, ordered by the Supreme Court, resigned prior to the vote. A defiant Khan says he is in the fight to protect his country's sovereignty and has called his supporters to the streets to defy opponents determined to unseat him. Khan acted unconstitutionally last Sunday in blocking the no confidence vote and dissolving parliament. The Supreme Court ruled on Thursday, ordering parliament to reconvene. So, fam, it seems like things are going back and forth right now. It obviously looks like some type of coup backdoor where they're bribing members of the parliament to go against Khan for the no vote to get him out so they can get their own person in there. They don't want this guy to rule anymore. However, it's not over.
It's not.
No.
Because he has a lot of public support.
Yes. So this is what happened the other day. He made out a tweet. He says, "I will be addressing the public meeting in Peshawar on Wednesday after the Isha prayers. This will be my first meeting after the removal of the Gajo as a result of change of government on external signals. I want all our people to participate in this gathering in full force." The next tweet, 43, "Established as an independent and sovereign state, we are calling for immediate elections because the only way forward is for the people to decide through fair elections who they want to elect as their prime minister." And then on 44, fam, I have never seen before in my country's history, seen so many people come out on their own today to overthrow the government of bandits. And you can see, Oz, if you can make it big after you play it, that would be great. That's good. So you can see, fam, they're just taking to the streets, thousands and thousands of people. Today is supposed to be the day. This guy could be kind of like, at least when it comes to his people and leading them, he might be like this Ortega kind of figure where he could take control, start a new constitution, give the people of Pakistan what they want. And that's a leader who's going to represent them and not the West's needs. Afghanistan and Pakistan, in my mind, are like the toilet bowl, the Ukraine of Eastern Europe. They're used as a toilet bowl. The United States just pisses and shits all over them, doesn't give a damn, keeps them poor, keeps them divided along with the West. And now this is what you got. This is a chance, I see, for a populist leader to maybe push his way through so that the Pakistani people can actually achieve real sovereignty. Now, I'm just speculating, and I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's a possibility here, fam.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I mean, the United States has too much going on right now. There's too much opposition to what the West in general, and the West is obviously ruled by the United States at this point. Britain has become an extension of that. The European Union has become an extension of that. But that's a very fragile structure, because you can look at France and see that they see what time it is, right? France is going through elections as well between Marine Le Pen and Macron, and then you have this whole you have this right winger who is Marine Le Pen, then you have a neoliberal, and which is worse? I mean, it's hard to say because they're worse in different ways, and you have the vast majority of the West being a fragile state right now, where they have to choose between their loyalty to the West, to the United States, and economic suicide, which is what's happening, what would happen with completely trying to cut off Russia and China. And it's just not going to work this time. And I think with nations right now in the global South, that's where the fight is, where you can see the pushback against Western hegemony, and where you see like people able to realize that what's actually happening, because it's happening to them. And I think that's what's missing here in the States, is people realizing like what is happening, because they're not really experiencing like the direct empire.
Yeah. I just had this last clip of Imran Khan in 1992, just to give you a little bit of his personality. I know that a lot of people out there don't pay attention to sports, but sports are really big within a nation, within the country. And when people glorify, he's like the Michael Jordan, right, of Pakistan. And it's just very interesting, because I think, fam, too, as well, that this move was not just about to defy the West. It's about the fact that they're also recognizing that the United States is not the only country in the game anymore, that Russia and China are now, with them bonding together, they're going to have resources. They're their neighbors. And maybe if he survives, if he takes power and he survives any type of American coup or regime change, he's going to have new partners, and they're going to have to include Russia. They're going to have to include China and stuff. And this guy, I don't think that Narendra Modi will meet with him, because I think Modi feels that Imran Khan doesn't have enough power in his own country. We were told by Raji before, Pakistan is controlled by that military. Well, I still believe that Imran Khan wants peace more than anybody. Really, I believe that he's willing to do that. You've seen his behavior, how he acts and whatnot. So, I mean, there's a real big possibility with this guy. And, I'm hoping for peace down the road, especially peace between Pakistan and India. I know that might seem far-fetched from a lot of people, but why not? Why not throw some love into stuff? If it becomes a geopolitical situation, you know what I'm saying? And we can find ways that people can love and exist with each other as neighbors, despite their differences when it comes to religion. And that's a positive thing. And I would hope that something like that could come out of this, maybe, fam. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe. I think it's optimistic, but we'll see. I think it's possible now more than ever.
Let's see. Let's run a quick clip of Imran Khan in 1992, his whole heart and his spirit, and how he kind of grabbed that country by saying, we have to be tigers. We have to be lions.
If they were to progress, they must win this match.
Head. Tail. Okay. Head. Oh. Slider. Race spin. Head. Wheel bass. Okay. Good luck. Good luck. Yeah. All the best.
Imran, I thought you were the lion of law. What's this?
Well, this is what I've been telling Alan, that I want my team to play today like a cornered tiger, you know, when it's at its most dangerous.
You've got the honour of tossing the coin. Graham Gooch, you're going to call, apparently.
Ball or the right? Okay, all set to go? Okay, here we go.
Okay, the ball. Who's won it, Imran?
We'll bat.
Is that because of a bit of a worry about rain?
Partly. I mean, you can't take a chance. And the second reason is, you know, it's excellent batting conditions.
You must be really pleased with the way the side has pulled together in the last few games.
Very much so. You know, we really have been through the fire. We looked like being knocked out. And sadly, you know, to have come back, it's given me the greatest pleasure and satisfaction.
Yeah. I see you got your tiger on again. You want them to play like cornered tigers?
Yes, that's the motto recently, and they've done a great job. You know, they've played like tigers, especially the younger boys. You know, they haven't been overawed by any situation. And if they play like tigers, I don't mind if they win or lose today.
All right. Your last World Cup, you've been a great cricketer and a great ornament to the game. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
See, fam, you can kind of see how that rhetoric and that mentality actually kind of be applied to, like, you know, a country too as well. You know, we have to live like tigers here. We have Western forces invading us, you know, and that team was on the brink of elimination many times. And, you know, it's cricket. It's one of the, you know, one of the biggest sports there. And he just lifted a whole nation up when he won that. That was the only cricket title for Pakistan in 1992. So yeah, that's just a little bit about Imran Khan.
Great.
The last thing I had too was just so we know, and this is, I'm not going to go into this, just so we also know, is that Hadi, the Saudi Arabian leader in Yemen, the one who's been exiled, living in Riyadh, is now out. He's gone. They have a 2-month ceasefire between Yemen and Saudi, and that was after the Yemen hit the oil fields. But they also hit an oil depot, a power plant, and a water desalination plant. So now we have this ceasefire, 2 months. Hadi's out. It seems like they're going to go more the UAE way with the STC, which is the Southern Transitional, the group which is more in line with tribes and whatnot. So we're just going to see what's going to happen in Yemen. But now Hadi's out. It didn't work. He's gone. So he's no longer going to be there. He's out of power.
Okay. Good update, fam. We have our guest coming in at 4:30 shortly.
Yes. Jump right into it.
All right, let's get some super rays.
Okay, we have a couple super rays there. Guess, fam. You'll never guess who was in the room first.
Trey Wright.
Nope, he was second. Juan Ryan, thank you for the Super 8 contribution. Trey Wright was second with Howdy. You were late today, Trey. Come on, don't let nobody beat you. I only watched the Convo Couch on Rockman, says Arthur Carter. And the accidental activist is also here. There's nothing better than spending a Wednesday afternoon with the Convo Couch, the Rock fams and the Truth fams.
Well, thank you, guys. Thank you, fams. By the way, shout out to Trey Wright for going all the way to DC. It was hard, I'm sure, but from Florida, all the way from Jacksonville to DC, and just being a trooper and helping out the Assange folks there who did a great job and had a great event. Several events too. There was the End of the Damn Wars event where, I don't know if you saw, Pasta, but there was a moment where they were marching and they ran straight into the Ethiopians protesting the TPLF and protesting US intervention in their country. And it was
great.
like, it was great. And they all got the video that I put out on Twitter, and they were really excited to share it. Like, they were happy that happened, and they were both calling for no more sanctions, right? And that was a pretty nice organic moment where you saw that. There were also people who wanted to stop the Korean War, like the Korean intervention and the hatred for North Korea. But then, of course, there was like 2 or 3 lone pro-Ukrainian people that were just standing there, like holding their Ukrainian flags. And then right next to them were the repent people. Repent. So DC is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Franco says there's demonic vibes.
I was going to say. Oh, fam. 5.
We are on slide 666. All right, so nobody's really talking about this in depth, but I caught this because I've been monitoring a lot of what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. And the Russians are not stupid. The Russians are really good at chess, and the Russians have been watching the patterns that are not that difficult to unravel of the US in particular, and you know, Washington, where they try to blame everything on them when it's clearly not. I mean, every single event has been debunked essentially, but they're preparing for another false flag against Russia, and they are making the Azov Battalion the victims this time. So several days ago, the Russian Defense Ministry put out this bulletin where they were saying that according to confirmed reports, the Kiev nationalist regime is preparing another provocation to accuse Russia of allegedly massacring civilians in Irpin, Kiev region. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the units of the Russian armed forces left the town more than a week ago, and this was a few days ago now. The Security Service of Ukraine plans to bring the bodies of local residents killed by Ukrainian artillery shelling from the morgue of the town hospital on Polevaya Street to the basement of a building on the eastern outskirts of Irpin. Then a staged action with shooting and destruction of an alleged Russian reconnaissance group that arrived in Irpin to kill witnesses of Russian war crimes will be staged by the Security Service of Ukraine in Pucha-Voditsky forest area. At the same time, the bodies of the captured Russian servicemen previously killed by nationalists under torture will be presented as undeniable evidence in the forest. The cynical stage action is organized for later distribution of video footage through the Western media. So they put this out, and it was predicting what then we saw later, which is what would happen later, which is this next part where now this is what's in the mainstream media today, where they're saying Western powers look into an unverified claim of possible use of chemical agent in Mariupol. And if we recall back when Victoria Nuland and Ted Cruz were having this little interaction where they were denying the existence of, Jen Psaki had been all over Twitter denying the existence of the biomedical labs, right? And then they came in and started saying, well, they exist, but we don't want the Russians to get their hands on it. And Victoria Nuland was saying like that she was afraid of the Russians getting their hands on it. And then what happened is Ted Cruz basically prompted her and was like, well, if there's a chemical attack at all, we know it's going to be from the Russians, right? And she was like, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, it's the Russians. So you can see that manifest, and they tell you what they're going to do. And so the Russians already knew that this was going to happen, and they were sort of prepping for it. So this is from the article, and this is the New York Times, and they said, the United States, Britain, and other Western allies, along with Ukraine's government, are examining claims that Russia deployed a chemical agent that sickened a handful of people in Moscow's unrelenting bid to gain complete control over the ruined Ukrainian city of Mariupol. Peter Andruyshchenko, an advisor to the city government, said local officials believe that some chemicals had been dropped by a drone on the city's sprawling Azov steel plant, one of the last redoubts of the Ukrainian forces defending the city. They said it was unclear whether it was intended to be lethal. He said that it might be something like tear gas, but they could not be certain. Just as right off the bat to what I've said, Pasta, this screams Syria.
Yeah.
This screams what happened in Syria in 2014 with Duma, right? And
one playbook, fam. One playbook.
Yeah. And I just want to say
they can't come up with anything new.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. But I just want to say that the people that covered Syria on the ground, like Vanessa Beeley and Eva Bartlett, can easily spot this because they were there. And it's the same exact playbook as you just said.
Fam, I don't know if you know this. I'm a newspaper guy now, right? And what's it say? Because the same playbook is written in the mainstream media papers. Once we got the RJ over here, which is the Associated Press, what do you know? President Biden calls Russia's war in Ukraine genocide. So it's the same thing, and it talks about Mariupol, whatnot. Yes, I called it genocide. They're all referring to the false flag attack that you pointed out in Bucha. So it's just the same bullshit over and over again. You don't even believe anything you see now. As soon as they say it, you're automatically calling bullshit. How long could they hold on to the lies? I'm just very curious. A lot of people who were traditionally more like lean towards the neoconservative kind of mentality that we had to be the policeman around the world. I'm wondering if all of them are saying, you know what, we got to stop being the policeman. I don't believe anything they're saying anymore. It seems like to be all about money so they can throw it all over the place. Billions of dollars going to Ukraine while we have homeless people all over the streets, a lot of them veterans. How long do you want to take this for? How long are you going to take this before you stand up and say, I'm done with your BS?
Right. And the thing is, they use, like you just said, they use the exact same accusations. They talk about chemical weapons. There's zero evidence of that. They talk. Russia pointed out the manipulation of the bodies, which has been done. We talked about the Bucha attacks. We talked about the attacks in Kramatorsk. And again, it's easy to debunk it, but at the same time, the propaganda is so intense that random people who aren't paying attention, they're like, oh, look what Russia's doing. But this is what the media continues saying. They're saying that something was dropped in the area and that it came from a drone, and that they're not sure if it was poison. And the Ukrainian military commanders in the city said that Russian forces had used a drone on Monday to deploy a poisonous substance of unknown origin. So they don't, they can just say, oh, we have intelligence that tells us X, Y, Z. We have sources that say this is a poisonous substance, but we don't know what it is. And supposedly this poisonous substance caused respiratory difficulties and neurological symptoms that can be associated with chemical agents in the handful of soldiers and civilians. Again, using this sort of, oh, they're attacking civilians. Just wait till they once again weaponize children for this. The reports, though unverified, and so they have to admit that these reports are unverified. They have, because they are. And they said are being treated seriously, giving the longstanding warnings by Western intelligence agencies that President Vladimir Putin of Russia might use unconventional weapons to subdue Ukrainian opposition. Having failed to seize Kiev and quickly topple the Ukrainian government, Russia has turned its focus to Ukraine's east and south, and defeating the remaining forces in Mariupol is essential in Russia's effort to gain wider control over the region. If Russia wanted to defeat Ukraine, wanted to crush and eliminate Ukraine, they would have done it within the first week. This is and they say, oh, the warnings by Western intelligence agencies. So by the same agencies that led us into this conflict, it's absolutely ridiculous how they position themselves as to having some sort of information when it's really nothing. It's just the intelligence agencies want this narrative and they want to put it out. So they say, oh, they have this and they have that. And if you look at what's actually, I don't think I even put it in here, but if you look at what's the map of Ukraine and the map of the battles going on, you see that the expansion of Russia in taking so many of these cities and control of these cities is actually what's happening. And Mariupol in particular is one of them. So they're just trying to pretty much paint a complete opposite picture as to what's actually happening. And the worst part is we have become defenders. The United States government, the military, and all these idiots with Ukrainian flags on their profiles have become defenders of Nazis. On Tuesday morning, the Azov Battalion, this is how they describe them, a group that was founded as a far-right volunteer unit and is one of the main Ukrainian forces holding out in Mariupol, issued a statement and released a video on its official Telegram channel that purported to offer more details. So now the Azov Battalion is just a far-right volunteer unit. It's not Nazis. It's not groups that have been found to torture and commit war crimes against Russian prisoners and civilians. Countless civilian testimonies. I've been putting them out there on the Convo couch. You guys can see countless. There is this guy, Maxim Gagorov, who is a journalist. He's been on the ground doing a lot of interviews with civilians in Ukraine, and he's showing the testimony as to how they were treated. And it's just video after video of them saying that, this isn't true. And so the Azov Battalion released a video, and I'm going to show the video. But before I show the video, they basically said that at least 3 soldiers and civilians had been affected and that they were in relatively satisfactory condition, that the substance had been deployed close to the Ukrainian military positions, but some distance from civilian locations, and that it was impossible to investigate the scene of the crime due to enemy fire. So you see how they position themselves? Like, we don't know what this is. We're not exactly sure what type of gas it is. It's unverified. Oh, and we can't investigate the scene because there was like military fire. So it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anything to say before I?
Well, I just want to say that what you were going over before too, as well, when we had the whole situation, when we were kind of alluding to Victoria Nuland, oh, there's going to be a gas attack. I still just I can't get rid of the image of Mike Lee, I believe his name was, and Ned Price going back and forth. Okay, where are you getting this information from? I just told you about it. It's intelligence from the Pentagon that we have. Where did you get it from? Oh, well, you know what I'm saying? Where they create it. You know what I'm saying? They create the narratives. That's all it is. It's bullshit. They lie all the time. I mean, it's that other meme, fam. It's like, you know, the CIA and the Pentagon, they lie all the time, but they're telling the truth on this one. Give me a break.
Exactly. And it's I hope it's becoming more and more obvious for everybody. I know our audience knows, but some people, you know, it gets easier to spot each time, unfortunately. But so basically the Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister, Hanna Maliar, told the national television channel that the government was working to verify the information coming from Mariupol. The British military said earlier on Monday that Russia had used phosphorus munitions as weapons in eastern Ukraine and raised the possibility that they could be used in Mariupol. Phosphorus weapons are not considered chemical weapons, and their limited use, while controversial, is not forbidden under international law. You know why they have to say that? Because of Israel using these gases on Palestinians. So they have to say that it's not technically forbidden. So so
our allies can use them, but you know,
it's kind of cool when they use it. But
our adversaries now.
No, not them. So let's go ahead and play the video, and maybe you guys, it'll have subtitles in English, so you guys can see the.
I can translate them.
The poor members of the Azov Battalion, like, being victimized.
Вчора окупанти використали проти військових та цивільних осіб Маріуполя отруйну речовину невідомого походження. Епіцентр дії речовини був віддалений від місця перебування людей, тож це посприяло їх мінімальному контакту з речовиною, що, можливо, врятувало їм життя, але є наслідки. Зараз неможливо провести аналіз і з'ясувати, якою речовиною було отруєно людей, адже перебуваємо в повній блокаді, а епіцентр ураження обстрілюється росіянами, в тому числі з метою знищення доказів свого злочину. Дещо дивує те, що, маючи тисячі вбитих росіянами цивільних Маріуполі, всі заговорили про нас лише після атаки хімічною речовиною, хоча місто щоденно піддається атакам авіації, флотом, важкими вогнеметними системами, артилерією, а також фосфорними боєприпасами.
До нас надійшли постраждалі з ознаками можливого застосування хімічної зброї. Серед цих ознак були виражені гіперемія обличчя, підвищення артеріального тиску, сухість та печія в області ротоглотки, слизових ділянок очей. Враховуючи наші умови і в наших умовах, була надана постраждалим симптоматична, невідкладна медична допомога.
Ну, мы сильно не выходили, мы еле, на первый еле дошли, глянули, хотели подышать обстановку, глянуть просто. Ну, смотрим, там белым-бело по заводу вообще, белым-бело. Стало сразу плохо, шум в ушах, тахикардия, сердце и слабость, вот падаешь и все. Еле сюда вот добежал сверху, то есть там 10 метров расстояние. И вот мамка вообще отъезжала, 3 раза еле откачали. А вообще сердце останавливается, оно все, глаза закатываются и все. Мы двое были, а потом мамка стала плохо тут уже. Сквозняк, вентиляция по-любому, и тут вытяжки, вентиляция по-любому затянула легко. У всех одинаково, Слабость, температура сейчас вот в конце уже, под утро еще пошла температура. Тахикардия, шум в ушах, и давление падает, походу, или поднимается, что ты вообще ничего, ты не можешь действовать. 5 шагов прошел и падаешь сразу, все. Ну, я там пробыл минуту-две и спустился вот сюда, вот там 5 метров, мне уже чувствую, ну, шум в ушах уже пошел, понял. А сюда пришел вообще, я еле тут с лавки стал. Слабо за того, что ты ничего не можешь, вообще ходить не можешь. Стоял такой, как туман вообще. Откуда, что, я не... Ну, вот, по заводу, вот, по территории, как туман вообще. Белый такой дым, не знаю. И сладкий какой-то такой привкус какой-то, не знаю, чего это.
Нам надо эвакуировать оттуда. Мы мирные жители, и вот это такое случилось. 3 раза приступ, сознание теряла, тут еле спасли. Ногами не могу ходить.
А здоров'ям у вас до цього все було нормально,
Ну,
так?
было нормально, да.
Угу.
Ми були на позиції в укритті. Відчули якийсь вибух. Піднялися перевірити, що до чого. Піднялися. І я побачив такий, як туман. Більше схожий на дим. Він не густий, але такий схожий на дим. Скомандували в укриття. І коли заходили, я відчув задуху. Дуже важко було дихати. Практично не міг вдохнути. І одразу вже запаморочення в голові, ноги підкашуються. Ніби вони якісь ватні. Дали команду вдягнути протигази. І все, вдягнули протигази. Відчув себе дуже погано. Дуже погано дихати. Що воно таке, непонятно. Що воно було.
За результатами проведеного огляду можна зробити висновок, що були застосовані або отруйні, бойові отруйні речовини, або сильнодіючі отруйні речовини, переважно задушливої дії. На жаль, повну верифікацію діагноза провести не можна, оскільки ми знаходимося в повній блокаді і токсикологічний аналіз ми виконати не можемо. Саме тому пацієнтам була надана допомога з урахуванням максимального перекриття усіх можливих видів всіх речовин.
Okay, so that's a report from the members of the Azov battalion. It's not everyday Ukrainians reporting that. It is members of the Azov battalion that have a video somehow that was made. Now there are reports from Russia, the Defense Ministry of Russia, that there's a lot of creation and filming of these videos going on. Several journalists that have been there on the ground have said that there will be, right before an accusation against Russia is pushed out, there'll be film crews that show up with media. And then, you know, that's what happened in the last one in Bucha, where film crews appeared and then all of a sudden there was like these bodies out there. So is it a possibility that during war there would be chemical agents used? Yes, but who's had the chemical agents historically here? Who has the biolabs with ties to Metabiota, which have ties to Hunter Biden and also ties to the gain of function lab research done in Wuhan? That's not a conspiracy. That is something that actually happened. And we went over some of that, but there's more and more information being released from this dump that's happening. And it's interesting how the moment we start hearing about these false flags, we start ignoring like the ties between the defense, the US Department of Defense, Hunter Biden, the Pentagon, and these biolabs, right? And people just like stop asking questions. Who's really has a history of doing this? You could go back to Syria and Duma. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we also have a history of making sure that we propagandize. We have money in the budget to make sure that's going out there. The word of mouth is better sometimes than the actual actions taking place on the ground. All right, we can't win them. Let's win the information game. Let's win the propaganda game. Let's make sure, you know, and at the end of the day too, as well, when Scott comes on, I can't wait to ask him a few questions because at the end of the day, I still feel sadness from all human life over there and all, you know, all life period, you know, what's going on over there. So, I mean, it's sad. it's just sad. And it's terrible because at the end of the day, it's about colonial powers pulling the strings, not caring, fam, about either people on either side, about any of the Ukrainians. It's like that bird, you know, the United States, go over there and get some corn, and they don't care. Ukrainians turning Ukraine into a Vietnam for Russians is bad for Russians, but it's awful for the Ukrainians, and we don't give a damn.
Right. And this is going to continue, and this is continuing. So after Russia kind of predicted that this would happen, then you saw the mainstream media stories all over the place. Now there is the new false, this is from the Russian Defense Ministry again. They're saying this is false stage provocations to accuse Russian armed forces of allegedly abusing the population of Ukraine are being prepared by the Kiev regime under the guidance of British intelligence services in now the Sumy region. Representatives of the Ukrainian and Western media have been invited to Seredina Buda town in Sumy region, which was formerly under the control of Russian troops, to conduct stage video footage. In order to conceal the provocation and prevent it from being exposed by real witnesses, a curfew has been imposed in the city, and the local population has been forcibly evicted from the places where the filming took place. So as I said before, there are reports of filming. And here in Nizhnaya Srovatka near Sumy, bodies were being dragged into one of the basements of residential buildings to be presented as allegedly another victim of the Russian army, as conceived by the British filmmaker units of the Russian troops allegedly massacred and humiliated civilians as they withdrew. Another fake will be promoted by the Western media in the very near future. Its aim is to further increase Russophobia against the backdrop of Europe's rapidly developing economic goals or economic crisis. Please note that Russian troops withdrew from this location 3 weeks ago on March 20th. Such events, if they really happened, could not have failed to become public in such a long period. Moreover, the Kiev regime is looking for any reason to accuse Russia of genocide of the Ukrainians. A whole network of foreign information psychological influences on the population is currently operating in Ukraine, producing dirty tricks on a professional basis. We will see the results of their anti-Russian activities more than once. They also talk about how Ukrainian authorities make extensive use of interested countries and nonprofit organizations. For example, the French leadership sent a group of French servicemen and the gendarmerie to Ukraine to collect information on alleged crimes committed by Russian servicemen, together with representatives of the International Commission on Missing Persons, which was created by an initiative of the US. On April 11th, French Special Operation Forces personnel, together with tech experts from the French gendarmerie and the Interior Ministry, arrived in Ukraine via Germany and Poland through the so-called diplomatic corridor. Given the partnership of these, quote, experts, there is no hope of an impartial investigation. Apparently, their main areas of activity will be to cover up numerous war crimes against the population of Ukraine and the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics committed by the Ukrainian authorities over the last 8 years, as well as fabricating accusations against the Russian armed forces. So they're saying here, like, they're not, you know, there's this community that's supposed to look at what's the war crimes that are happening, and they haven't covered anything that happened during those 8 years. And the last part on the planned Ukrainian provocation in Irpin, which is what you just saw on the video and what the mainstream media is talking about now, according to confirmed reports, the Kiev nationalist regime is preparing another provocation to accuse Russia of allegedly massacring civilians in Irpin, Kiev region. And again, this is what they said, that they left a long time ago and that these bodies are going to be presented as more evidence, but they're not legitimate. So just wanted to give a brief synopsis of that. If you actually go and you look at what the Russian Defense Ministry is putting out there, look at what on-the-ground journalists are doing, who they're interviewing, and you look at exactly at the information as it's presented, as the evidence they have, not like, oh, we have evidence that's secretive, we have evidence that we don't know where it came from, we can't confirm nor deny, we don't know what the substance is, then you can easily find the truth. But you have to go off of mainstream media, you have to go off of Twitter, you have to go off of YouTube. I mean, You can go to Telegram, you can go to RT via Odyssey. It's very hard. Like you have to sort of dig, but if you look at any information that's non-Western, you can find it. So we do have our guest here now, fam.
Yeah. It's perfect that you just, we did this section because we can lead right into it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Ritter is with the Convo Couch today. Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you guys?
Great.
We're doing good. We're hanging in there. I mean, this is at any given moment, any one of us could be taken off YouTube, could be taken off Twitter, could be, I just wanted to start by asking you, you were suspended twice. You were suspended the first time and they gave you back your Twitter account. And then you were suspended again. Did they give you a reason as to why? Is this a permanent suspension?
Well, I was suspended the first time for a tweet that I posted on April 6th about the war crime that took place in Bucha. The problem is I wasn't buying into the narrative. I was pointing the finger at the Ukrainian National Police, where all of the available data leads you to. I mean, there's literally nothing that says Russia except the Ukrainian government. All the data, all the evidence says Ukrainian National Police. So I was suspended. I appealed, they lifted it, and then they suspended me again, this time for a tweet that I wrote on April 3rd. So they went backward. And also about Bucha. And this time the suspension is permanent. They informed me this morning that I am permanently removed from Twitter, and that's just the way it is.
This all started back in 2000. You know that. A lot of people don't know that when you were so vocal about what was going on in Iraq, I never forget that stuff. I mean, that's when I first learned about Scott Ritter. However, I want to kind of talk about what's going on. Unless, fam, did you want to talk more about censorship, or should I just dive into some war questions? I'm sorry if you want to piggyback off that.
No, I mean, I guess this is all part of it, right? You're not buying the narrative, and it's not even that you're just not buying it. It's the narrative has so many holes that anybody could, with any sort of, that takes any time at all, can see that the narrative is wrong. So if you want to go ahead and dive into what we're just talking about,
can I add just one quick thing to that? But I'm not tooting my own horn, but I'll tell you this: when the U.S. government comes out with some information, that information is derived from allegedly an analytical process that we call intelligence, from the intelligence community. I was the intelligence community. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was trained to do what they do, and I did it very well. I got 2 classified commendations for the director of the CIA for my analytical work. I called it right in Iraq during the Gulf War. I called it right pretty much my entire professional career. I called it right to the embarrassment of those who were calling it wrong. So when I come out and commit to something, it's only after an assiduous process of evaluating the data in its totality. This isn't some knee-jerk reaction from some pro-Putin, wannabe. I'll put my professional intelligence credentials up against anyone, and bar none. So when I say that the evidence points to the Ukrainian National Police, you can take that to the bank, because I wouldn't have committed to that unless I believe that I could have taken that to the President of the United States and made the same assessment.
Yeah. That's what I was kind of talking about too, as well. Your credentials, they're solid. Back in the days, I said, we shouldn't go into Iraq. There are no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Who told you that? Scott Ritter did. He's the UN chief inspector over there. He's been going over there for a while. He says there's no weapons of mass destruction. There weren't, and you were right. But by proving yourself right, you proved a lot of big heads wrong, and they've been out to smear you, silence you, and it doesn't surprise me. The only thing I'm surprised about, Scott, is the fact that it took them so long to take you down. Are you a little surprised it took them this long after all the stuff you've been talking about when it comes to Ukraine and Russia?
First of all, I in order to answer that, I have to know exactly what their standards are. I believe that I had been operating well within the framework of 4 corners of what's permitted in Twitter. There is literally nothing in my tweet that exceeds the kind of rhetoric, 288 characters at a time, that other people put out there. In fact, other people out there calling for the death of Russians, the murder of Russians, wishing harm on people. I have done none of that, and yet I'm targeted for, abusive behavior and harassment.
Yeah, you're targeted for exposing the empire. Let's be honest over here. That's what this is all about. Are you surprised, though, that this war has not kind of wrapped itself up? I mean, I remember some guys on the No Agenda project before they were going on vacation a couple of weeks ago. They're like, this is going to soon be over. It looks like Russia's starting phase 2, and that was sending more troops in the ground. Why hasn't the war ended whatsoever? What's going on the ground?
Well, as Vladimir Putin said when he spoke the other day, we're not going to let your time frame drive our military operation, meaning all those people saying, why aren't you going faster? He said, my number one concern is mission accomplishment. And then he said, the military is doing this operation in a very literate fashion. And that's Russian for by the book, meaning they're doing this, very methodically, professionally, with absolute assurance of the outcome. And he said, it's also imperative that we do not inflict needless casualties, both on our own troops and on those whom we are fighting. We're not out to murder anybody. So, I was one of the people that believed that if the Russians put the pedal to the metal, this thing could be over. But the cost in human life would be on a scale that Europe hasn't seen since World War II. And the Russian leadership has made a decision that that's not the route they're taking. And if that means that we have to spend a couple more calendar days talking about this war, that's our problem, not their problem. Russia doesn't march to the beat of the Western media drum. They don't care. They're simply going to do what they're going to do when they're going to do it. But the one thing we know is that Putin said this will not end until all of our objectives have been accomplished. He also said, I will not negotiate with those losers in Kiev. It's over. The time for negotiation is done. We are now going to do it our way. And when this ends, it'll not be because Russia negotiated anything away. It's because Ukraine will sign an unconditional declaration of surrender. Unconditional. Russia will dictate the terms. That's straight from the president of Russia's mouth. I believe him.
Yeah. Everything that Russia has said they would do or they have done has been proven right. But every single accusation from the West, you could go to Bucha, Kramatorsk, and the various accusations about the ghost of, or the existence of the ghost of Kiev, and etc. We could go down the list, have been found to be entirely false or have been poked. There have been enough holes poked in that. Now that the Western media is saying that Russia is once again using chemical agents in Mariupol, and they're saying that the Azov Battalion are just far right volunteer groups, as according to the New York Times. This is what they literally wrote in this article that we just went over. What do you make of that in terms of, when you juxtapose that with the denial of U.S. involvement in these biolabs and the whole mess with that? Who really has a history of using chemical agents and staging false flags here?
Well, we know that the United States has been susceptible to false flags. The most successful recent false flags involving chemical weapons has been carried out by the Syrian opposition, the jihadists, Al-Qaeda, the White Helmets. They staged a number of false flags, and the last one of which in the town of Douma resulted in French, British, and American aircraft and naval vessels firing cruise missiles and dropping bombs on Syrian infrastructure. Now, the interesting part is the Pentagon came out and gave a very detailed briefing about the targets they had. These were known facilities associated with sarin nerve agent, because one of the allegations being put forward is that the Syrian government used sarin nerve agent. So this is the sarin nerve agent production facility. This is the sarin nerve agent storage facility. This is the sarin nerve agent arming facility. And then it turned out that sarin nerve agent wasn't used. And now you're left wondering just what the heck was the U.S. government talking about, because apparently everything they briefed is absolute fact turned out to be absolutely wrong. And now we have a situation here because the U.S. government has been susceptible to this, because the the Biden administration has declared a red line on chemical weapons, that you're going to start hearing multiple allegations coming out. The one in Mariupol is just literally an absolute joke. First of all, it comes from the Azov Battalion. They're not far right. They're Nazis. Okay, they're Nazis. They have swastikas tattooed on their bodies. They give the Hitler salute. They worship Hitler. They worship those who fought for Hitler. They're worse than whatever worst term you can possibly come up with. So, you know, right off the bat, they have a credibility problem. But they told a story. They said 3 guys. The Azov Battalion is buried under the ground right now in Mariupol. They've been digging for 8 years. And they've got a network of tunnels and all that. And there's some very interesting videos put out by the Russian military showing them clearing these tunnels. It's dangerous work, deadly, close-in fighting. And the Russians have drones overhead. And the drones look for movement because these Azov guys are leaving from one tunnel, moving, dropping into another. So 3 of them were making a move to a tunnel when a drone fired a missile. The missile exploded on the ground. Now, let me tell you a little bit about drones and missiles. Missiles have fuel. The fuel is a toxic substance, usually a solid material that, when it hits, will generally blow up along with the warhead. But oftentimes, the fuel doesn't blow up completely, creating a cloud of very caustic material that will cause your eyes to burn, your throat to burn, your nose to burn, your skin to burn. I know, because I've had it happen to me. And you know, and it's unpleasant. It's not a chemical weapons attack. So these guys said the drone fired a missile, it blew up, and they started feeling these symptoms. And so they were evacuated the hospital. Next thing we know, it's a chemical weapons attack. Yeah. Now, the United States, being a responsible superpower, should dismiss stories like this right off the bat, just not even give them life, not even breathe life. Nazis are saying that chemical weapons were used by misconstruing a drone missile attack on Nazis trying to run from one tunnel to the other. And suddenly we're treating it as if the innocent Ukrainian people are being subjected to genocidal acts by the brutal Russian occupier using chemical weapons. And yet, if you listen to the news on the media, that's the way it's portrayed. And then they repeat it afterwards. It's not, you know, what it really is. You have CNN, and they're using chemical weapons. MSNBC, they're using chemical weapons. It suddenly became a statement of fact, a reality. Now they don't even have to refer to the Nazis anymore. They just say, and they're using chemical weapons, and everybody nods their head going, yes, of course they are, because they're Russians. It's just absurd.
It's kind of crazy too as well. We have the Mujahideen, was one of the first radical groups we ever supported. I think I asked you last time on the show that you came on with the panel, is there a chance that this ideology will spread throughout Europe the same way that the Al-Qaeda and ISIS ideology is spreading throughout the world too as well? But what I want to ask you is, you understand this region pretty well. What causes one to join these Azov battalion groups, these Nazis? Because this is different than Hitler with a nation state, right? This is Ukraine and people kind of conforming to this ideology within a different nation state. Is it economics is the first thing that pushes people towards this radicalism?
Well, the radicalism we're talking about has its roots in the economic and social situations that gripped Europe, Central Europe, Germany, the Galatian region where Ukraine is then under Polish control. And it leads to, you know, this national socialism, that it's a combination of fascist ideology and economic power. And so, you know, the father of the Azov movement, Stepan Bandera, and some other Ukrainian nationalists were alive and well and living during this time. They resented the fact that the Ukrainian homeland had been given to Poland. And so they started resisting the Poles. And then in 1939, when the Russians took over Western Poland as part of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, Stepan Bandera's people started to resist the Russians. And then when the Germans invaded, they embraced the Germans as their liberators. And then they became one with the Germans. Over 80,000 of the Bandera fighters joined the Waffen-SS in the early weeks following the invasion. Hundreds of thousands joined over the course of 4 years. and they fought alongside the Germans as part of the Waffen-SS, as literally Nazi stormtroopers. They claim not because they worshipped Hitler and Nazi ideology, but because they were able to resist the Soviets. And indeed, in 1944, when the Soviet Union started kicking the Germans out of the area, a lot of the people fighting for the Germans deserted, went to the woods, and started fighting the Soviets exclusively. But their ideology was the same. These people remember the glory of fighting for the 12th and 14th Waffen-SS Panzer divisions. And so they started adopting the symbology. They adopted the songs, the imagery, etc., the routine, the ceremony. And they did this while they fought the Soviets. It was a bloody fight. From 1944 to 1955, over 300,000 people were killed in this fighting. So it's not like this is minor. This is major. And the Soviets lost close to 40,000 army and security forces fighting these people. They were eventually defeated. Now, the CIA backed them the entire time. And keep this in mind. That means the CIA is backing known Nazi sympathizers. Why? Well, these guys were under the control of the 12th Department of German intelligence during World War II, meaning Nazi intelligence. And when the war ended, the CIA took over that whole department, just adopted it. So we took Nazis straight from wearing Nazi uniforms, and now they work for the CIA. Now they're directing pro-Nazi, anti-Soviet fighters. The CIA funded this organization up until 1990. And we helped enhance the spirit of nationalism, meaning that we helped breathe life into Stepan Bandera. But that's who these people worship today. They call it nationalism, but they're using the symbology and the routine and the ceremony of the Nazis. And it's unforgivable, especially as an American who had our grandfathers cross the Atlantic and sacrifice so much to defeat this hateful ideology. To have it now breathed back into life by the United States should disgust every patriotic American.
Yeah, if you're going to talk about patriotism in that sense, then yes, it's absolutely discussed. And by the way, it's like they're turning Russians into Nazis and turning the Nazis into victims, which is, it's entirely upside down world right now that we're in. I wanted to ask you too, since you have literally experience on the ground, logistical military intelligence, the narrative from the West is that Russia is, of course, losing this war. But when you look at any Russian map or any sort of map that's coming from non-Western sources, you can see that Russia is taking over control of many cities, including Mariupol. What is your assessment of the current state in terms of control between Russia versus Ukraine?
Well, first of all, we need to understand that Russia is not fighting your traditional war of occupation. So anybody who's looking at a map and trying to determine success by the amount of territory captured, you're looking at the wrong metric. It's not about territory captured. It's about battlefield results, meaning dead Ukrainian soldiers. And the Russians are slaughtering them. I mean, I'm not bragging, I'm not gloating, but it's the God's honest truth. The Ukrainians don't stand a chance. They're being annihilated as we speak. Over 1,000 of them surrendered yesterday rather than to die in Mariupol. These were their elite Marines, some of the best fighters. But yesterday, the Russians carried out an attack on one of the mechanized brigades that's in Donbass. Over 150 guys were killed. This is happening multiple times a day, every day. The Russians are dominating this battle. And so what we're seeing on the map right now is that the Russians, having completed phase one, which was shaping the situation on the ground in Ukraine to their advantage, they're now moving to phase two, which is the isolation and destruction of the bulk of the Ukrainian army. And that's getting ready to happen. It's going to be a double envelopment with a pincer coming from the north, a pincer coming from the south. It's going to encircle 60 to 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers, and they are either going to die or surrender. There are no other options. It's over. It's all over. Now, Putin has said, it'll be over on our terms, meaning that Russia's not going to rush into an ambush. One thing we should have learned about this is that the Ukrainian soldiers are very good. Very good. They're well-trained, well-led, well-equipped. And given the chance, they will kill you, as they've proven many times when the Russians have made a mistake. So the Russians are going slow. They're going to use their superiority and firepower and maneuver capability, and they're going to take their time and put the Ukrainians in an untenable position. Then the Ukrainians have a choice to either fight or die or surrender. And I think you're going to see mass surrenders in the coming days. Mass surrenders.
Well, Scott, you know, you get censored. A lot of other people get censored. I think Gonzalo Lira was censored the other day too as well, fam. I'm not sure. Where do people get this information from? Because this is a totally different story from what's being told on the mainstream media. And with that being said, even though the Russians are going to take their time and do it on their time scale, it seems because they don't want to mess up a lot of the infrastructure, and they realize that the people have to go on with their lives after this element has been ruined. How long is this going to take then? You know, I mean, I know you said they're going to do it on their own terms, but from the story you just told, that seems like this should be over very shortly.
Well, I personally believe that the Ukrainian military has reached the end of its tether. And I think we're seeing evidence that every day. You know, early on in the war, you might have captured 8 Ukrainians. You might have captured 10 Ukrainians in isolated battles. Now they're capturing hundreds and now thousands every day. That means that the Ukrainian military has reached the end of its tether and they're starting to collapse. So I think this will be sooner rather than later. Now, you talked about where you get the sources. I don't mean to be facetious here, but when I was an intelligence officer, I would be fired if I briefed the President of the United States only by reading the Washington Post and New York Times and watching CNN. They would fire me. They said, well, then you're a journalist. I would have to go and get Russian sources, monitor the Ministry of Defense, monitor the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, monitor the Ministry of Industry, monitor the various entities that are posting. The head of the Chechen Republic, Kadraev, puts out a very interesting and very informative link on his Telegram page. I monitor all of these. And by doing so, you get a feel for, you know, what the Russians are saying. Now, that doesn't mean that you just repeat what the Russians are saying, because that's not analysis. That's just journalism. I then take that back because they're not giving me the whole picture either. They're holding on to information. They're holding back. There's things they don't want to say. And then I have to rely on my own personal experience, my own expertise, and my knowledge of Russian doctrine, Russian military affairs, try and fill in the gaps and paint, you know, an accurate picture. Sometimes you get it all the way right. Sometimes you get it mainly wrong. You know, this is, you know, intelligence is an art, but, you know, generally speaking, if you do your job right, your conclusions are going to be taking you in the right direction. You might have a few deviations here and there. You know, if you thought that the war is going to be over in 2 weeks, well, you were wrong. But if you thought the war was going to be over in 2 weeks because Russia's going to win, well, then you were mostly right, because Russia's going to win.
In terms of what the Pentagon is doing, like in terms, because there's a lot of fear, and they weaponize that fear in Americans here. Americans that have never experienced imperialism from the same perspective as people in the global South or people in West Asia. There is this fear that perhaps this might escalate further. Do you see this conflict, in spite of Russia having the upper hand, in spite of Russia having the capabilities? Do you see that there are potential players within the Pentagon that are insane enough to want to wage full-out war with Russia and still consider Russians to be bluffing, because that's their narrative? Oh, Russia's just bluffing. We're sending more weapons. We're going to keep funding this even if Ukraine is failing. Do you see that there's a potential for a continued escalation?
If you remember back in the during the final months of the Trump administration, there were a lot of people that were coming up with crazy theories that Trump would start a nuclear war, that Trump could launch a nuclear weapon, et cetera. And General Milley, to his credit, you know, educated the American public on the actual processes involved in nuclear weapons authorization release. And simply put, no president can order nuclear war on his own. There has to be a system of constitutional checks and balances that relate to the law of war, issues of proportionality, et cetera, before weapons can be released. And military commanders are obligated by their oath to the Constitution not to execute an unlawful order. That's a long way of saying that the military is in charge here. The president is the president. The president can issue an order, but that order will normally only be given after long consultation with the military and only after the appropriate, every I has been dotted and T crossed. So all these crazies that are talking about they're bluffing, et cetera, they're not part of the decision-making cycle. They don't have a vote. They're just simply blowing hot air at the American people from whatever platform they're at. The people that control nuclear weapons, the people that would employ nuclear weapons are a very, very serious crowd. And they take that job very seriously because we're talking about the end of the world. And so no one's going to enter that lightly. And I'm not worried about inadvertent nuclear war. What I am concerned about is inadvertent conventional war. That is for people thinking that the United States has more conventional capacity than it actually does, and they get us involved in a shooting conflict in Europe that we can't finish. I'm not going to denigrate the professionalism of the American soldier, but I will say this: we don't have enough of them, and they don't have enough equipment, especially for deployed in Europe. And if they get into a shooting match with the Russians, they will lose, and they will lose decisively. It'll be an embarrassment along the lines of Kasserine Pass in North Africa, or the initial battles that we fought in Korea. That doesn't mean that we're going to lose the war. Eventually, we could mobilize, we could get enough firepower over there to beat the Russians, but is that really what we want to be doing? The other thing that concerns me is this addiction we have to the expansion of NATO. What part of Russia will not tolerate the expansion of NATO to its borders do we not understand? Didn't Russia, we said, oh, Russia's bluffing. Russia doesn't bluff. They warned us that if we tried to bring in Ukraine, this is what's going to happen. We've known this since 2009. So why in God's name are we pushing Finland, of all countries, to join NATO?
Yeah.
The Finns know that in 1949, they signed a peace treaty that guaranteed the only reason why they're going to be allowed to live as a nation state with territory close to St. Petersburg, at the time Leningrad, was that they promised to be neutral and to never join a military alliance that could threaten. If Finland thinks for a second that Russia's going to sit back idly and let them join NATO, I'll tell you right now, Russia will destroy Finland to a degree greater than they're destroying Ukraine. Ukraine right now is a special military operation, meaning the gloves are on, they're going soft. If Finland seeks to join NATO, it will be destroyed as a modern nation state. The Russians cannot tolerate a NATO force literally right over the border from the second largest city, St. Petersburg. They can't tolerate a NATO force that can move across the peninsula and strike one of the heaviest concentrations of Russian military power in the Kola Peninsula. What are these guys smoking?
Yeah.
The Russians aren't bluffing, and they've said that. Russia has said this. They have said if Finland joins NATO, there will be a military tactical solution. The same terminology they use for Ukraine. So what do we think is going to happen? This is what scares me, that we have people that don't understand that Putin doesn't bluff, ever.
Yeah. And Sweden is now also getting into the mix, I believe, too, as well, right?
They don't share a border. So I'm not so much. Sweden could join NATO and Russia would just be angry.
But why would Sweden want to join NATO? That's my question. It just seems so odd. And that's going to be my last question because I have to get out of here for today. But why would Sweden even want to join NATO?
Well, this is what I don't understand, because first of all, there's a other part of it, because just because Sweden wants to join NATO doesn't mean that Sweden gets to be in NATO. Article 10 of the NATO Charter says that NATO will allow nations to join who qualify if, after consultation, NATO feels that them coming in would enhance the security of NATO. If you know that bringing in a nation is going to cause a war, how does that enhance NATO's security? So I hope that the issue of Swedish and Finnish membership will be debated hotly at the NATO summit this June in Madrid. And, we might have a surprise, because on April 24th, the French go to the polls and they may elect a lady called Marine Le Pen. I'm not a fan of her ideology. It's very far right wing, but Marine Le Pen has said she's not going to play this NATO game. She's not going to allow Europe to get involved in a war. And her goal is to be friends with Putin. So if Marine Le Pen is the president of France come June of this year, Sweden and Finland will never get into NATO, because that requires a consensus agreement, and France will not agree. And that might be the saving of the world. That might prevent another European conflict.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions before we get you out of here. One of my questions was, what are the economic impacts that you think could potentially worsen if Europe continues in this trajectory of putting loyalty before economic sense? Because what's going on with Russia is obviously hurting the EU. It's hurting Americans here at home. And what are the possible routes that this could take to where the European Union, European nations, and even the British Empire, Great Britain, the UK, could actually be impacted?
Well, let's just make it clear. Europe cannot survive without Russian energy. That's just a statement of fact. You can have Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, the President of the United States, and everybody else get up there and talk about how we're going to, wean Europe off of Russian energy and we've got a plan. Europe, there is not enough energy in the world that is capable of being diverted to Europe in a timely and economically feasible fashion to compensate for Russian energy. That's just a statement of fact too. All of the damage and harm that's been done to the European economy so far, and it's been real, has happened without Russia doing anything. Russia hasn't turned off the gas. Russia hasn't shut down the oil. They're still buying the gas, they're still buying the oil, but the mere threat of Russia shutting this down and the efforts to try and find alternative sources of energy have caused the European economy to tinker towards the abyss. I mean, they're moving in that direction like lemmings to a cliff. And if they continue to push the Russians will shut off the tap. And when that happens, that's literally all she wrote. The German industrials are already telling Chancellor Scholz that the German economy is going to be permanently damaged by this in a way that hasn't been seen since the end of the Second World War. That means that Scholz will no longer be the Chancellor of Germany. There's going to be, if he continues down this path of self-suicide, he will be voted out of office, no confidence vote. And then Germany's going to be left struggling on what to do because they've committed to NATO, but they can't survive by keeping the NATO line. And all of Europe is going to be torn between, caught in the horns of this dilemma. Do they continue to maintain the artifice of unity based upon a tune that the United States is playing? Or are they going to look to their own self-interest and realize that if you want people to have a job, if you want to have a healthy economy, you need to basically walk away from NATO and the United States because they're only leading you in a direction of trouble.
A lot of people are under this impression that that Russia is, this conflict, that Russia is not necessarily opposing this international global order that has been talked about with the World Economic Forum via the Great Reset. Do you think that Russia is actually pushing back against this global order, or do you think it's just more of a separate thing entirely, or do you think this is just part of the part of the play of the whole global agenda?
Well, first of all, Russia and China have already said they're not playing that game. What we call the rules-based international order is over. Russia and China said it's done, we're not playing, and you can't have economies of those size and the scope and their influence in the world walking away and have this rules-based order that's been in place to guarantee American hegemony since the end of the Second World War survive. So it's over. Ladies and gentlemen of the United States of America, your moment in the sun where you dominated the world, could bully everybody, is over. It's finished, gone. What do you want the proof? Remember all those sanctions that Biden said will knock Russia out? Like Rocky Balboa punching whatever, Ivan Drago. Well, it's like Balboa swung and hit himself in the face because Biden didn't collapse the ruble. Ruble's stronger than ever. Biden didn't collapse the Russian stock market. It's alive and well and living. Biden didn't drive the Russian economy into the dirt. Their inflation rate, unlike ours, is dropping. The Russians have survived, and they survived by divorcing themselves from the West. Any notion that Russia's going to return and allow the West to come back in to work is over. Russia will never again work with the dollar. They will never again work with the euro, and they will never again work with the West. That doesn't mean that they can't have some trade, but the day of Russia bending over backwards to try and be a member of the Western economy is over, which means Russia is now working with China to create what's called the Trans-Eurasian Economic Union. This is a cooperative that will eventually have 2/3 of the world's population and around 60% of the GDP. You know who's going to be the minority in the world soon? America. You know who else? Europe. And Europe's going to divorce itself from America because you can't stick with a loser forever. And America right now is a loser. Soon, America's sphere of influence is going to be the United States, Canada, and Great Britain. That's it. Mexico ain't playing. Mexico's already walked away. Central America remembers the history of American imperial conquest. They're not going to play. South America's already rejected it. From Venezuela down to Argentina, they've said no, take a hike, Uncle Sam. Africa's playing with China. Asia's playing with China and Russia. We got no more playmates. It's over. It's finished. You can have the Wall Street Journal write whatever they want. You can have the Economist pay somebody, $13,000 to write a 25,000-word essay. The essay is meaningless unless it addresses this reality. Everything else is just hot air and propaganda. It's over. We lost. Russia wins. China wins. I'm not happy about this, but it's just a statement of fact. We blew it.
And lastly, I wanted to get your quick take on the ousting of Imran Khan as prime minister and then the subsequent protesting going on. Is there a chance that he could be the one to actually take the country into a new era where they're not as controlled or impacted by constant Western US-backed coups?
There is a chance. I mean, if he can survive, it's a very, Pakistani politics are rough and tumble, and I don't mean that lightly. People die. We saw that with Bhutto's daughter, and people get arrested and people get imprisoned. And Khan right now is a man who threatens, the establishment. He threatens the army. He threatens the intelligence services. He threatens the judiciary. He threatens the corrupt Pakistani business interest. And so he may not live. But if he does, one of the things about these ousters is that while the Pakistani courts and the Pakistani army didn't agree with Khan's interpretation of what the U.S. influence was meant to do, the Pakistani people know. You can fool them only so many times, and if they rise up and they elect him in the upcoming elections, re-elect him as prime minister, he will now have a mandate to shut down the army, shut down the intelligence services, shut down the judiciary, and make it resemble what the Pakistani people want. So this could be a revolutionary moment, but all revolutions come with a cost, and it could lead to, a huge increase in violence. Remember, there is an active Pakistani Taliban. There's a Baluch independence movement. There's other entities that that have Islamist affiliations, and if you weaken the army and weaken security services, these elements will take advantage. So you could see massive terrorism, violence, death, and Khan may not survive that. So, we could be watching the actual self-destruction of Pakistan, and the thing that should scare you to death is that's the self-destruction of a nation that possesses somewhere around 50 to 60 nuclear weapons.
Yeah, and that has largely been a U.S. ally up until, where this moment where the United States did not like that Imran Khan met with Vladimir Putin and said, no, Russia isn't our enemy. But Scott, did you have anything else that you wanted to say to the audience? Any updates on where we can find your work, anything like that?
You can't find my work on Twitter because I've been banned. So I'm working on what the next step is, if there's going to be a next step. I mean, sometimes the best thing to do is just go straight to the source. So if your internet server will allow you to go to Russia Today, I publish 2 or 3 articles a week there. Consortium News is another outlet that I like to publish in. And, who knows, I may set up a Telegram account and start putting my stuff up there. I don't know. This Twitter suspension has taken me by surprise. I never really intended to be on Twitter. It was my daughter actually built the account, and it sort of took on a life of its own. And now that life has ended, I'll figure something out. I'm not losing too much sleep over it. I think I laugh because it's only Twitter, but it's also free speech. It's also the reality that whatever you think of Twitter, and you can belittle it, 288 characters a time of self-important people putting out tweets as if they were God. But the reality is Twitter is a forum that that many influential people use. And it gives people an opportunity to interact, to engage in the kind of debate, discussion, and dialogue that makes democracy what it is. And by removing voices that don't conform to, the mainstream narrative, you're weakening Twitter as a viable platform of informed interaction.
Yeah, and also, Scott, I just wanted to say you have a Telegram where you put out a lot of information as well. So if people want to check out his work, it's on Telegram. Scott, thank you so much for coming on here. I mean, I could talk forever about what your work has been and what you've been doing. So thank you for sharing that and for speaking truth, because at any given moment, any one of us could be gone from any social media, YouTube. We've been censored as well. I lost my Twitter account. I got it back, but who knows how long that will be for. So thank you for coming on and talking with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Okay, we'll see you next time.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, guys, so I'm going to go over any remaining super rays. Oh, shoot, we got a lot. We got a lot. I don't know. I don't know where these came from. Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate all the help we can get. I didn't even get a chance to talk about my experience at the Assange event at the end of the day of Morph protests, and Ousted didn't get a chance to talk about the Defeat the Mandates because we were there. And so it was so hard to get everything out there. But let's see, what was the last one he read? Do you remember, Oz? Shonda's, I think. Chanda's was the last one, right? Yes. Okay. Okay, so Game.film, thank you for the Super Ray contribution. Any good books on the US regime change around the world? Keep up the great work. Love y'all. Yeah, I think we should do a thread on that. I think I should do a thread on that because I think there's just a gigantic list of books that I like it when people do threads on that. I think that's the best way to do it. I mean, obviously War is a Racket is a good starter one. But there's just so many, especially it depends on the region too. AREM, thank you for the Super A contribution. It's very generous of you. The Putin gas hike was caused by Joe Biden rashly cutting off Russian oil. If Biden was intent on cutting off Russian oil, not that it was a good idea, but if Biden was going to do it, doesn't it make sense to secure alternative sources before simply cutting off the Russian connection? Shouldn't Biden have first considered the consequences of losing access to Russian fertilizer, gas, etc.? I mean, yeah, I agree. Well, Biden doesn't care because Biden and everybody else will be entirely fine. Everybody in power, right? The American people won't. The American people here are largely suffering from so much economic strain. It's getting worse. There's a lot. Psychologically, people are still strained from the quote unquote pandemic. And I hope to see more information coming out too of in retrospect, it's what's happening because now, they're trying to bring back these mask mandates. A lot of people thought this was done. I just heard of a T-Mobile employee who was pregnant being fired by T-Mobile for not being vaccinated. So there's this whole thing where I don't think it's done. The narrative spinning is done either with Russia or Ukraine or with the COVID narrative. And they don't care as long as they get to say what they want. Laura Baza, thank you for the Super A contribution. It is always appreciated. Bilam, thank you for the Super A contribution. It is always appreciated. I think that's it, unless I missed one. Yes, I think that's it. Guys, we will be back Friday, I believe. If we're back tomorrow, I'll let you guys know, but it should be Friday. And again, thank you so much for everything you guys are doing to help us keep going. We will keep bringing you all the information and we'll update you on what's coming next. Also, look out, I'm gonna share this video. It's gonna be in Spanish, but I did a whole interview with this gentleman that streams from Ecuador, but they have a large Mexican audience. We talked about the connections between Hunter Biden and Meta Bayada and the Wuhan Institute with the biolabs and the funding of the biolabs. That's something that I think we need to continue pushing on. I think there's a lot more to this conflict than meets the eye. So it was a pleasure having Scott on. It was great. He has a plethora of information, and we'll see you guys next time. Combo out.
Well, not quite out. We've got a Keep left a Super Ray here, and it says, this was a great live stream. I love Scott Ritter. I wonder what Cindy Sheehan is doing. Like, is she still active in the anti-war movement?
Don't know. I have no idea. Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the stream. And everybody on YouTube, shout out to Jilly Love for being an amazing moderator, and everybody else that watched us today. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Oz, thank you for engineering.
My pleasure.
And Pasta, who had to go. Thank Pasta for being Pasta, right? So combo out, guys. Bye.